Chapter 691. Mr. Bai compared the interference value of the psychic wave network and repeatedly sized up Luo Nan's state. In the end, he let out a long breath and took back the wristband from Luo Nan's ear. He returned it to He Yueyin and made an okay gesture. More or less. I can basically confirm that he has left the REM phase. Although his brain is still active, the order is increasing. He can wake up at any time. His face looks quite red. It should be the remnants of the dream stimulation. Might even be a wet dream. Mr. Bai casually joked. Zhang Yingying curled her lips, but He Yueyin didn't respond at all. She just hung up the wristband. Mr. Bai actually wanted to communicate with Gym Master Xiao, but he didn't expect He Yueyin to just hang up without saying any polite words. At this time, He Yueyin lightly touched her ear. It looked like she was communicating on the psychic wave network. President Ouyang. Everyone in the room raised their eyebrows when they heard the name from her mouth. As for He Yueyin, she nodded slightly toward Mr. Bai after listening to a few more words. She shared the communication with him. Mr. Bai walked away from Luo Nan's side and paced around the room. Yang, what's up? You're currently treating Luo Nan. Is the situation okay? Yes. It's quite optimistic. He already has clear and distinct consciousness activity. The order of the interference of soul strength has stabilized. What level is his consciousness activity at? The abyssal region? I'm not sure about that. How am I supposed to follow him? How about this, old Bai? If it's possible, wake Luo Nan up as soon as possible. He can accept some negative effects. Mr. Bai subconsciously turned his head and cast his gaze toward Luo Nan on the sofa. What's the meaning of this? Ouyang Chen's grave voice transmitted over. The branch sent a notice. I think headquarters will send it out soon. There are abnormal movements on the level of the polar domain. According to the reports of many extraordinaries in different regions of the world, their light senses are rapidly increasing. The subsequent effects will likely affect the abyssal region. Therefore, for the sake of safety, all activities in the abyssal region are prohibited for a period of time to avoid risks. Hold on. What's the meaning of this? Mr. Bai was a veteran ability user, but he was still confused when he heard this. We'll talk about the specifics later. Take care of Luo Nan for now. Wake him up no matter what. Prevent his consciousness from lingering in the abyssal region. We have a meeting at Shangding at 5 in the morning. Remember to attend. While Mr. Bai was still in the process of understanding, He Yueyin and Ouyang Chen were already discussing specific matters. The scope of the notice needs to be expanded. In the past, it was enough to go down to the architect level, but now the situation is more complicated. Without a doubt, this referred to the fortress that Luo Nan had created. Ever since it floated in the abyss region, there would be at least a few hundred people and at most 1,000 sightseeing groups every day. This was not just for show. Ouyang Chen sighed. Everything has its pros and cons. No matter what, let's inform them first. He Yueyin confirmed a few more key points and issued the relevant notices before ending the call. In the blink of an eye, everyone was a little distracted. Judging from their expressions and actions, they should have received the notice from the branch. What the hell is this notice? The polar region is glowing, so activities in the abyss region are prohibited? Zhang Yingying was confused. In fact, for someone like her who had yet to reach B rank and was not a psychic, it was indeed a little difficult for her to understand the logic behind it. Zhang Yingying was fine. At the very least, she was experienced and knowledgeable. She knew the severity of the matter. She said it, but she would certainly pay attention to it in her heart. But for the other people of the Xia City branch, especially those who were unruly, rebellious and curious fellows, the results of this notice might not be ideal. Of course, if they could control the forward operating base, the fortress and block off the exit, things would be much easier. He Yueyin pondered in her heart. Her gaze subconsciously turned to the sofa, but it just so happened that she collided with a pair of pupils that seemed to carry bloodshot cracks. Mr. Luo. Xia City was bound to be extremely busy tonight. From small events like the New Year's Eve to large events like the aberration infection, and now a brand new polar domain light event had appeared. The event itself was bound to be sensed or understood by the vast majority of people. But correspondingly, the pressure it formed was hard to find a channel to vent and transmit. Even Ouyang Chen felt mentally and physically exhausted after being immersed in it for a long time. The notice was sent quickly, But it was a very tiring matter to receive definite feedback from ability users who were used to being lazy and free. Especially after the appearance of the Abyss Region Fortress, the special circumstances that Xia City faced increased the difficulty. He only had the opportunity to catch his breath when it was almost 4:30. There was still half an hour before the briefing. He stole a bit of leisure time and walked in front of the French window. The view from the floor of the Xia City branch was quite bad, but tonight was quite a coincidence. When Ouyang Chen's gaze passed through the shadows of the surrounding buildings, he just so happened to see the crescent moon hanging in the eastern half of the sky. Tonight's moon seemed to be dyed with a layer of blood. It was as if the blood had seeped down from the polar domain. Not only did it smear the moon, it smeared everyone's eyes. How dazzling! An electric wheelchair came over from the corridor accompanied by a sigh. Old Yu sat on it with a blanket draped over his knees. There was still a bit of smoke on the blanket that had yet to dissipate. His originally loose eyelids drooped down as if he could fall asleep at any moment. Old Yu, did you take the opportunity to burn a turtle shell and take a look? Nope. I just smoked a cigarette and experienced the feeling of the past. Old Yu patted the blanket and swept away the non-existent ash. He chuckled. What a pity. It doesn't feel right no matter how I try it. It's not a problem with the smoke. The color of the light and the feeling are quite different from the past. The two of them had already exchanged relevant information. Ouyang Chen didn't plan on tormenting himself again. He laughed and said, Old Yu, it's nearly impossible to find someone like you who has personally experienced the light of the polar domain twice. Don't say that. Gong Qi made quite a bit of a joke back in the day. Of course, I wasn't much better than him. Now that his soul has left his body and he's gone missing. But who knows where he's pondering this matter in some corner. You're pondering it too. I admit to these words. I didn't understand it back in the day. When you extraordinaries came out, I thought I could put it in your category. But now that this has happened, I can't compare. I can't compare at all. Old Yu gazed at the crescent moon and sighed with sorrow. He asked in the end, what does the martial monarch think? I just contacted her. She's driving for a drive and she's going to see an old friend on the way. She won't be participating in the briefing. Old Yu didn't find it strange. He just sighed again. She's so calm and collected. I can't even be envious of her. What about Deep Blue? Did the Apocalypse Laboratory say anything? Over there. In the end, the moonlight of Xia City couldn't shine on the other side of the ocean. While Ouyang Chen and Old Yu were talking about Deep Blue and the Apocalypse Laboratory, an emergency video conference was being held in the Deep Blue world. The topic of discussion was none other than the light of the polar domain. However, compared to Ouyang Chen and Old Yu, the information they received was more comprehensive and more mysterious. Xiong Gumao confirmed at Ceres base that he felt the polar domain's luminosity rapidly increase. I've already consulted Europa's preliminary base. Commander Joseph confirmed that he felt the light of the polar domain phenomenon. 800 million kilometers. Wang Yu rubbed her cheeks and tried to change her expression. Oh, there's also the Deep Blue world. Thank you to the 4 extraordinaires who attended the conference at the last minute. The information provided by everyone has allowed us to confirm that the so-called light of the polar domain really does have the property of being unfathomable. The 4 extraordinaires who were located in different regions of the Deep Blue world and engaged in exploratory activities projected their images into the conference center. They were either smiling or indifferent, but all of them maintained a strong curiosity towards the series of information. Wang Yu maintained a proper posture and tone. The biggest news in the world this year has been released. However, forgive me for being a commoner. I really have no way of personally experiencing what the light of the polar domain phenomenon is like. I can only seek help from literature. There's only one relevant document that records a similar situation that occurred more than 40 years ago at the beginning of the era of distortion. I've already sent the relevant information to everyone. Everyone can compare it and give your opinion. The 4 extraordinaires who attended the conference were all rather interested in this information. They immediately flipped through it. However, this action didn't last for more than 2 seconds. They practically froze at the same time. Wang Yu's senses were very sharp. He noticed this detail. What's wrong? Someone answered him, it's dark over at the polar domain. The luminosity has weakened? No, it seems like something is covering it. What the hell? Even the person who spoke could not stand this absurd feeling. He wished he could deny it on the spot. Wang Yu, on the other hand, was more rational. His gaze swept across the extraordinaires in succession. Some paid attention to him, some ignored him, but the answers he obtained were more or less the same. In the end, Wang Yu turned to the region of Deep Blue's investors and controllers and locked onto his target. His gaze came into contact with a very young and trendy person. His hair seemed to be dyed a color similar to steel blue, and his skin was so white that it glowed. This combined to form a very strange overall hue, giving his relatively ordinary facial contours a peculiar charm. Professor Li Wei, what's your opinion? I won't express my opinion on matters that I can't accurately understand. Guessing makes one superficial and describing reveals one's incompetence. Rather than exposing one's shortcomings, it's better to observe. His harsh words attracted the unfriendly gazes of several extraordinaires, but surprisingly no one flipped the table in anger. As the convener and host of the conference, Wang Yu maintained a good attitude. He calmly smiled and said, "People always have to choose the right from the wrong. Forgive me for saying a few layman, but light always has a source. Where is the source of the light of the polar domain phenomenon? Can you locate it? The cover. Just now, was the light source blocked?" Chapter 692. The briefing conference convened at the Shangding building was about to begin. Most of the architect-level powerhouses in Xia City were present at the conference. The conference had yet to officially begin, but the latest situation in the polar domain had already changed. It was unknown how many people's heads were stuffed with the absurd reality of darkness and light. What had originally been a private conversation between Ouyang Chen and Old Yu had already turned into a large discussion with many people participating. The chatter was endless and everyone had their own opinions. The discussion only came to an end when He Yuan and her group rushed back from Aurora Cloud City. Gao Meng was the first to cry out when he saw He Yuan and the others push open the door and enter. "Hey, where's Boss Luo?" Gao Meng had been happily cooperating with Luo Nan for many days now. In his mind, Luo Nan was a super genius that appeared once in 100 years. Therefore, he wanted to know Luo Nan's opinion on this matter. But He Yuan and Bamboo Pole were the only ones who came. The most important thing was that Luo Nan was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Bai was also nowhere to be seen. Mr. Luo's grandfather is critically ill. The hospital has already issued a notice of critical illness. He has already rushed over. Mr. Bai is an expert in soul science and related pathology, so he has gone to help as well. Gao Meng went, "Oh my," but he was unable to say anything else. He Yuan looked around and discovered that people were missing. Her Majesty Empress Wu isn't here? Naturally, Ouyang Chen was the one to explain this. Gao Meng was a straightforward person. He clapped his hands and said, "This is great. The two people who are most likely to have fantastic ideas aren't here. Let's just stare at the information and make blind guesses." The people present were all used to this. They didn't mind hearing this. They just roared with laughter. There were currently a total of 10 people in the conference room, and there were a total of 15 people who were above the architect rank in Xia City. Aside from Her Majesty Empress Wu, Luo Nan and Mr. Bai, there were also the horned demons and Cragburst who were currently wandering in the wilderness. And so everyone was present. But when Ouyang Chen saw the ratio of the fleshly side to the mental side in the conference room, he could only agree with Gao Meng's explanation. He spoke in a chatty tone. I'll explain the matter first. Then everyone can discuss it." Anhai Sanatorium was located in the outskirts of Xia City. It was early in the morning, but there were parts of the emergency center upstairs that were brightly lit. Emergency treatment was being carried out for an elderly patient who was at high risk. At this hour, the recuperation center was spacious and empty. There was almost no one around and most of the lights were off. There were only a few cars parked in the parking area below the emergency medical center. They belonged to the doctors and staff who were on duty who participated in the emergency treatment. In the meantime, there was a civilian version of the SUV, which also turned off its engine and quietly parked at the edge of the parking area. However, there was another person in the car. He was sitting in the driver's seat holding a Coke cup in his left hand and a bucket of fried chicken in his right. He was munching away happily. In the meantime, an aircraft flew through the night sky and landed directly on the lawn next to the emergency center. A group of people hurriedly got off and ran into the building. The people in the car didn't even raise their heads, but they knew that it was Luo Yuandao's daughter's family. This high-speed aircraft was transferred through the branch's resources. However, this aircraft came directly from the Nader district, so Luo Nan wasn't on it. He needed to hurry over from the Pingjiang district on the other side of Xia City. Of course, Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts had arrived a long time ago. It was just that his thoughts were projected toward the emergency room. He didn't have the time to care about the cats and dogs in the corner. Hey, I, the one with the surname Jean, have fallen to the level of a cat and dog. Speaking of which, do you know that there's someone playing hide and seek in the emergency room? The driver with the surname Jean cracked a smile, revealing his sharp teeth and crushed bones and flesh. The rumbling of an engine came closer at this time. A flying car flew through the spacious hospital area at a speed of over 300 kilometers per hour. It finally braked and drifted, spinning as it stopped below the emergency center. The car hadn't even come to a complete stop when Luo Nan pushed open the car door and jumped out. He rushed onto the porch in 2 steps. By the time Mr. Bai got out of the car, Luo Nan had fallen nearly 20 meters behind. He saw that he was about to crash into the building, but his wristband vibrated at this time. Luo Nan instinctively assumed that it was his aunt at this time. He immediately connected. "I'm already here." Shui Lei's urgent and resonant voice poured into his ears. "Nanster, the gym master's old injuries have relapsed. He's being sent to the hospital right now. I've consulted with the branch. They recommended sending him to Anhai Sanatorium. They say that it's more convenient to treat him there. I remember that your grandfather is over there. Do you know him better?" Luo Nan stopped in his tracks in shock. "Gym master?" Luo Nan had just gone through a few rounds of baptism. His brain was a bit lacking for a time. He was stupefied on the spot, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. The windows of the civilian SUV in the parking area were tightly shut, and they were separated by 100 meters. But driver Jin's 5 senses and 6 senses were out of this world. He didn't miss a single bit of the corresponding unforeseen event. He began to chuckle and his mouth chewed with even more gusto. Yep, he didn't have any evil intentions. He was just taking joy in Luo Nan's misfortune. In the end, Luo Nan still went inside. Soon, the emergency center's front building recovered its tranquility. Driver Jean finished off the chicken leg and cola in his hand. He let out a yawn and fell back. The car's AI considerately lowered the back of the chair for him, and he prepared to take a good nap. In the meantime, another rescue shuttle came over to transfer the patient. It was probably Gym Master Xiao. Driver Jean knew this person. He was a genius for being able to live this long due to the great collapse of the genetic plane. At the very least, Driver Jean could empathize with Gym Master Xiao. Driver Jean raised his eyelids, but he didn't completely open them in the end. He just spat out a stream of hot air from his nostrils. It seemed like he was sneering and sighing. Then the hospital area recovered its tranquility. But not long after, the sound of knocking on the car window rang out. A tall woman stood next to the passenger window. She wore the hospital's trademark white coat. The length was just right, but it appeared a bit loose. That fast. Driver Jean got up and opened the car door to let the woman get in. The smell of disinfectant assaulted their nostrils. It was hard to describe with words the smell of roast chicken that filled the car. "What are you wearing that for?" Driver Jean grumbled and opened the car window. The woman in the passenger seat snapped her fingers. Before the sound faded away, hundreds of millions of related odor molecules were gathered by some mysterious force and expelled from the car. Chauffeur Jean said lazily, "Your Majesty is awesome." Empress Wu didn't even bother to look at him. She just nodded forward, indicating for him to drive. Old Jean immediately started the car. The civilian SUV drew a short arc and drove toward the area where the light and shadows of the street lamps intersected. It quickly passed through the main gate and left the sanatorium behind. On the way, Driver Jean couldn't help but feel a bit curious. That old man Luo, after you gave him a breath of immortal qi, he should be able to hold on for another year and a half, right? Not necessarily. If he waves the cloak 2 more times like this, even if a god really descends, he won't be able to be saved. Wu Jiong took off his white coat unhurriedly, hooked a corner of it and let it out the window. The high-speed airflow blew the white coat up. If one didn't care about the details, it really did look like a cloak fluttering in the wind. "Hey, do you have any sense of civility? I can't care anymore." As he spoke, the white coat was blown away from his fingers and flew into the distance, quickly disappearing into the darkness. Although it's already tattered and too heavy, I still hope that someone can catch it and buy us some time. You're counting on his grandson? Unreliable. If he jumps like this now, what will happen in the future? If it's that kid, if he's not as unlucky as you, I hope he jumps better and better. Even if he can't be a cloak, he can still be a shield. However, fate is ultimately uncontrollable. It's like a beam of light that escapes. Who knows if it will be annihilated and assimilated in the vast cosmos? Or will it safely arrive tens of thousands of light years away and be captured by someone? Driver Jean curled his lips. Let's use a woman's intuition to make a judgment. This is terrible. This is really terrible. Xingwu closed his eyes and his brain waves flowed in an orderly manner. His mechanical arm tapped on the virtual keyboard, and his personal diary and work diary were output at the same time. The content and direction of the two paragraphs were different, but they were smooth and natural. There were no signs of simultaneous operation. This was the basic operation of the School of Creation, and it was also the best way to test one's basic abilities. Xingwu keenly sensed that, compared to the output of his brainwaves, every action of the mechanical arm would have a delay of about 7/1000ths of a breath. One breath was the basic moment, which was 10e plus 44 times the minimum measurable time interval. Xingwu would never be able to reach the perceptual precision of the basic moment in his entire life. But for any advanced life form, refining the perceptual precision was a lifelong pursuit. Using breath, as the scale was too depraved. Even if it was reduced by 3 orders of magnitude, it would still be unforgivable on the battlefield. General Lone once said. Wait a minute, he was no longer on the battlefield and he was no longer the single knight who charged at the Outlands, but a retired officer who was sent to the reserves. He was the manager of the Stargate Infrastructure Management Office of U-1337, who had to spend all his time before retirement in this galaxy that even the Outlands were too lazy to visit. A communication came in. This is Xingwu. Oldie. They bring him here. Soon his deputy Xianxia came to his office with the rookie of the management office, Xanti. Xanti was a standard rookie dumbass. This was not a bad comment. Under General Lone's command, he was associated with the element of serious and naive. He was a good piece of steel that could be beaten. The only thing that Xingwu hated was the little guy's mental attribute that had gone awry. Director Xing. Call me sir. Sir. Reserve Corporal Xanti reporting to you. In the outer region of the U-1337 galaxy, a Class 7 wave anomaly has appeared. Based on the Praeger effect, I have calculated the approximate relative position and sector. The young man had already sent the relevant information. Xingwu sized it up and murmured, 42 squares away, that's 42 days ago. Is there any follow-up? Sir, there is no follow-up. Also, sir, it should be 21 squares and 21 days. We have changed the standard units of the heavens to connect with the various systems of the divine kingdom. There was a moment of silence in the office and then Xingwu said pleasantly, you are right, old habits have not been changed. Now, Corporal, you can follow the procedures and apply for a scout ball, the kind that can fly in hyperspace. Calculating at the highest speed, in about 5 Pantheon years later before your 20th birthday, you will receive the most detailed results. Maybe by then you can receive a reward from the military before your contract ends. It's even better if it ends. You can change your career in time and become an explorer. According to the information, you can find a high-level life-gathering area and immediately become a billionaire. Oh no, it should be a new pattern for the God of Dawn's cloak. Now go do it, child, good luck. The dumbass left in a daze. Xingwu turned his eyes to his deputy. Xianxia raised his hand to say, it has nothing to do with me, and then ran out of the door. The standard units of the heavens multiplied by 2 is the standard unit. Seems that the gods in the heavens are really cheap. Xingwu's voice was isolated in the office, but as his deputy, Xianxia could guess some of the content. But it had nothing to do with him. After leaving the door, Xianxia directly pulled a certain line. The relevant data is in hand. Traveling at high speed through hyperspace to the relevant sector, without a senior lord to oversee, driving the configuration will require a large team of at least 400 people. Recruiting now, we can set off in 4 standard weeks. At most 100 weeks later we will have a definite result. Chapter 693. Cat Eyes had a dream. He dreamed that she was crawling on a large net made of long metal chains. The net was endless and extended into the depths of the void with no end in sight. She didn't know where she was crawling, but she knew that there was a blazing sun in the center of the net, constantly radiating astonishing light and heat. The terrifying heat was transmitted through the long metal chain, burning her hands and feet. But it was not enough. It burned all the way through her skin, flesh, and bones, mixing the half-melted metal droplets with her body fluids, turning her into a part of this endless net. She struggled in fear, but she could not resist the momentum of the fusion. But at the same time, a vigorous sense of power rushed in wave after wave, pushing her consciousness to expand and expand, giving her an unprecedented sense of fulfillment and control. Afterwards, Cat Eyes vaguely remembered who the energy that was squeezing in had come from. This kind of forced giving and the complete loss of resistance made her inevitably have some subtle associations. It was like a gunpowder pinch. After a few sparks, the compressed gunpowder exploded with a bang. This was different from the external pressure. This was an impulse that originated from Cat Eyes herself. The explosion was not a destructive shockwave, but a poisonous fire that rapidly set a prairie ablaze. It burned through every corner of her body, both inside and out. Cat Eyes let out a hiss as she suddenly woke up with a start. Only then did she discover that her entire body had been soaked in bodily fluids. The poisonous flames that had scorched her body had turned into a warm and sticky sensation that was hard to distinguish. It was truly terrible. She looked at her watch. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, only 2 hours before she fell asleep. Cat Eyes sighed and extended her hand to scratch her scalp. Her long hair, which was already drenched in sweat, was scratched even more messily. There was no way she could sleep again tonight. She might as well take a shower to freshen herself up. Cat Eyes activated the Hexier while she was bathing. She prepared to send a few messages to relieve her boredom. However, as soon as he opened it, the whooshing sound of information notifications filled the air like locust-like arrows, making him feel as if thousands of arrows were piercing through his heart. The intelligence system of the psychic wave network thoughtfully picked out the common keywords in most of the information for her and categorized them accordingly. Ah, there's a bug in the fortress. Boss Luo, save me. Boss Luo, come out. Take off Boss Luo's bracelet to ensure your safety. Tear off Gao Tianshir's sticker to ensure your life is valuable. Boss Luo is going missing again. Where are the people from the project team? The first to be trapped is the project team. Winky face. Due to the fortress project in the Abyss region, the late spring night of Xia City experienced the fiery heat of summer ahead of time. Several hundred people were in a chaotic mess, alarming Gao Meng, Mr. White and other veteran B-rank powerhouses. They tossed and turned, but the most important figures had disappeared without a trace in the darkness of the night. The first time this happened, it was horrifying. The second time, it was painful. The third time, it was sullen. The fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time, and even the countless times, it was completely numb. Cat Eyes entered the friend group established by Luo Nan. It clearly displayed that the group owner was not in the service area. However, most of the other group members were still awake. Bamboo Pole, who was currently trapped in the fortress, barely managed to send a voice transmission. His voice was full of resentment. Boss Luo got away again. What are you security guards doing? Hee, do I have to emphasize it again? Right now we live on as sparring partners. Qin Ikuan, who had already been relieved of his role as a bodyguard, was like a floating ghost. Shuelei, who always had a stable schedule, was woken up. He provided outdated information. In the afternoon he went to the sanatorium to see Grandpa Luo and the gym master. He even practiced Sanzhou with me. You didn't break his legs. Shuelei felt wronged. Right now he's most proficient in speed and control. The photoelectric leg and the illusory magnetic field are simply amazing. What a crappy name. It's not like I came up with it, Brother Papercut. Seeing that the topic was about to stray to the other side of the Pacific Ocean, the always calm Bamboo Pole was truly enraged. I'm about to be squeezed dry. Is this the time to discuss Dog's hit names? What happened next? Where did he go next? I asked Brother Red Fox. Nanster trained with Brother Red Fox. Yes, he learned city tracking and anti-tracking techniques with me. We walked to the orphanage in the Forest Wall district on foot. We practiced midway, then I went back. Dingwan? Oh, he's not in the group. Where's Dean Wan's eldest disciple? Little Xia? There's no need to ask. Last night Luonan spent the night at Gear. He's been like this every day. Ruiwen even went to deliver food. Cat Eyes found an opportunity to cut into the conversation and provided the most valuable information. However, this was tantamount to selling Luonan out. Zhang Yingying sent a raging emoji. Then why can't I find him every time? This was because he would jump several thousand kilometers away. He was quite willful. Zhang Yingying was unable to obtain a satisfactory answer from Cat Eyes. She turned around and shouted at Red Fox, "To think that you call yourself Fox. He is a shut-in who never steps out of his house. Don't you have any idea why he is learning from you?" Red Fox replied with a disdainful emoji. "It's more important to figure out Boss Luo's whereabouts." Papercut acted as a peacemaker, doing his best to bring the topic back to the topic. But as he spoke, he strayed a bit off topic. Speaking of which, I find it strange. No matter what, Boss Luo has nothing to do with shut-ins recently, right? What's going on with him? Has his body been taken over by someone? Cat Eyes sneered and replied, "Puberty has arrived. Hormones are being secreted in excess. He's already 17, big sis. Endocrine disorder. Fine. It doesn't matter what stage Boss Luo has reached in puberty. Where in the world is he right now? There are over 100 people waiting for him to save." The matter helplessly returned to its original point. In the early morning hours of April 22, 2097, the tracking operation against the Fortress Project Team's chief consultant, Luo Nan, ultimately came to nothing. Everyone was unable to find Luo Nan in the end. The project team and a few experts in Xia City, who already had some understanding of configurations, worked together and finally solved the problem. There was no need to mention the misery involved. Cat Eyes watched the development of the situation with cold eyes. Her heart was unmoved. After all, there had been far too many people in the past few months. There had been far too many people who had been left in dire straits due to Luo Nan's willfulness. Especially those who urgently wished to obtain power from Luo Nan's body, from the sun behind Luo Nan. Yes, perhaps Luo Nan himself was included. Cat Eyes finally obtained the pleasure of rebalancing herself when she thought of this. D City. It was 4 hours earlier than Xia City. It was already early morning. D City was in the southern hemisphere. It was currently autumn and winter, so the seaside was cold and gloomy. There was a rocky beach near the seaside that was rarely visited by tourists. Lu stood on this rare piece of flat ground. She faced the sea and felt the strong sea breeze blowing against her face. She felt as though she was standing in front of a blast furnace that was burning steel. The air current that assaulted her face could carry high-temperature flames at any time. Common sense and reality. Simple sensations and complex high-level senses entangled with each other. They slowly mutated her perception, allowing her to gradually get used to this special environment until she became accustomed to it. She closed her eyes and the burning Blood Soul Temple appeared before her eyes. The solidified configuration of the Abyss region seemed to be very close to her. It could burn off her eyebrows and destroy her face at any time. Every stream of lava that flowed on it contained a high-temperature energy that was 10 times higher than before. The Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss region originally didn't have any substantial temperature to speak of. What it gathered was just the extremely paranoid emotions and thoughts of the believers. After going through a series of operations, they became a medicinal primer that mobilized the boundless energy of the Abyss region. But after going through a period of adjustment, these emotions converged into the stone forest and the lava lake to circulate and circulate. They were clearly bestowed with the direct killing power of burning the soul and flesh. This forced the higher-ups of the order to be more cautious than ever when they mobilized the relevant medicinal primer. Otherwise, they might suffer a backlash. Of course, once the transfer was successful, the impact of the Abyss region's storm would explosively increase. 4 months after New Year's Day, the Blood Flame Order had washed away its previous decline and quickly established a foothold in D City. This was largely due to this. Because of this, Jiang Yuanzhen and the other elders and higher-ups of the order were pleasantly surprised and conflicted. They endured this complicated and difficult change together. The one who did all of this was none other than Luo Nan. Mrs. Halder had not told anyone else about the matter of cooperating with Luo Nan other than her personal secretary. Jiang Yuanzhen and the others only knew that Mrs. Halder had found a professional consultant or investor. As for who it was, everyone had their own guesses. As for whether or not they guessed the correct answer, it didn't matter. After Elder Mo Lun passed away, Mrs. Halder had the final say in the matters of the Blood Flame Order. Even without Mrs. Halder's opinion, Luo Nan's flourishing career in D-City over the past 4 months, as well as the more fundamental awakening of 16 devout believers and fanatical believers, had the persuasive power to sweep away everything. Every time Yin Lu thought of this series of changes, she thought of the young man who had created this miracle with his own hands. She thought of his superb and immeasurable methods, and her heart felt heavy. It couldn't be considered a good feeling, but it was just like how her senses had already mutated. After a long time, all she had obtained were progress and benefits. It was hard to avoid her feelings becoming blurry. It was like being choked by someone experiencing the thrill of suffocation. When her thoughts and emotions reached this point, Yin Lu suddenly became absent-minded. She took a deep breath of the sea breeze, unable to differentiate between hot and cold. It was also at this time that the undulating waves of the distant sea seemed to be patronized by the magma at the bottom of the sea. A large expanse of seawater suddenly boiled. Bubbles swelled and burst, rising and falling in succession. There was even a gurgling sound coming from that direction. Yin Lu hurriedly collected her thoughts when she saw this abnormal situation. She picked up the special fireproof towel she had prepared to the side and moved forward. The waves of the sea pushed toward the shore one after another. The boiling region drew closer, leaving behind special traces of whirlpools on the surface of the sea. The light on the surface of the sea wasn't too bright in the early morning. She couldn't see the bottom of the sea with her naked eye. However, Yin Li's mental senses, which had improved quite a bit during this time, were already able to touch the extremely restless emotions that were 1,000 times hotter than the boiling seawater. Chapter 694. The one struggling in the water was Madame Halder. At this moment, the Blood Flame Order's Lord Ablatum was no longer as calm as usual. She looked more like she was drowning. Her hands and feet twitched and she curled up and rolled. The bubbles that came out of her mouth and nose indicated that a large amount of seawater had entered her lungs. It was as if her life could be taken at any time. The surrounding seawater was boiling. Affected by the high temperature of Lady Halder's body, the seawater was constantly changing its form, going back and forth between liquid and gas. But at the same time there was a coldness that never changed. It was like a prison, like a torture device. It constantly surrounded Mrs. Halder, lashing and torturing her, challenging her physical and psychological limits. In the depths of the ocean, Yin Lu seemed to be able to see the silhouette of a youth directing and controlling the current situation, changing it in the direction that he wished. Yin Lu didn't dare to take another look, nor did she dare to interfere. She could only stand stiffly by the shore. About 5 minutes later, the rising tide pushed the rising and falling bubbles, and also pushed a naked body to the shore. Purely from a visual point of view, this woman's body was mature, fit, and well-rounded. However, the most eye-catching thing was not her figure, but the heat radiating from her body, which seemed to be able to burn and distort the air. However, her skin was strangely pale without the slightest hint of blood. "Madam." Yin Lu stepped on the seawater and ran forward. She draped a long scarf over the exhausted Mrs. Halder to cover her. Mrs. Halder was still in a daze. She lifted her eyelids and saw that it was Yin Lu, but she didn't say anything. She curled up under the fireproof towel, her body still twitching. After another minute, her body gradually calmed down and she recovered a bit of her strength. The first thing she said was, "Mr. Luo, what do you think?" On the shoreline, part of the seawater that was pushed up by Lady Halder was still close to the boiling point. The corresponding water, light and steam, under the influence of an invisible force, spiraled up and down. In the time of 2 or 3 breaths, a blurry human figure was formed. The sea breeze blew and the water vapor that formed the human figure fluctuated a few times. When it appeared again, it was already a relatively clear face of a young man. It was Luo Nan. He stood behind Lady Halder's curled body and looked down. He did not immediately respond. Although he didn't say it out loud, he wasn't completely unperturbed. Luo Nan had to admit, the woman in front of him was truly ruthless. She really did have the courage to break through the norm. Right now Madame Halder was very weak. She lay paralyzed on the rough rocky beach, practically motionless. Beneath the fireproof towel, cold sweat seeped out of her body before being dried by the high temperature. In such a physical condition, if it was a normal person, they would have died 800 times already. Only the body and soul structure of an ability user could withstand it. Even though she was in an incomparably sorry state, Madame Halder was in a completely different state of mind. In the depths of the lava lake in the stone forest of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, boiling emotions and desires accumulated layer by layer, and even provoked the restless heat from the deep space of the polar domain, forming a destructive and extreme environment. The so-called lava was no longer enough to describe it. It was more like the core of a planet, always maintaining a high-temperature and high-pressure environment. For Yin Lu and the other higher-ups of the Blood Flame Order, this was a forbidden ground that they couldn't step into. Otherwise they would only die. However, in this forbidden zone of death, a bright light that was different from other emotions and desires was swimming in the chaotic and restless flames in an extremely intelligent manner. Every time there was a twist and a tremor, it revealed its ability to the fullest. It cut off all interference and it absolutely wouldn't converge with external objects. Such an intense contrast gave one a marvelous feeling. Every time the muddle-headed wraith sign saw this bright light, it would reveal its greedy, gluttonous nature. If Luonan hadn't restrained it, it would have long since charged over and gobbled it up. Perhaps it was due to the wraith sign's influence. Luonan had seen it many times and he felt that it had its own flavor. Naturally, Luonan felt a sense of respect for Madame Halder, who was able to nurture it, create it, and polish it. At the same time, he felt an intense interest and curiosity. Luonan still didn't speak. He raised his arm and used this temporarily constructed hand of water vapor to touch the nape of Madame Halder's neck. This area was still exposed to the air. It looked pale and exquisite, but it contained a high temperature. Even Yinlu didn't dare to touch it directly. Luonan's half-incorporeal hand made contact and a hissing sound rang out. The front part of the hand turned blurry and turned into steam. Then it was restrained by an incorporeal force, maintaining its approximate structure. It only conducted heat backward, and soon Luonan's body of water vapor began to evaporate. The undulating waves beneath Luonan's feet displayed its ability to conduct heat, and new seawater swirled up to replenish the heat. Not only did this temporarily constructed body not suffer any damage, the details became clearer and more discernible. Madame Halder and Yinlu witnessed all of this. Yinlu felt that Luonan's methods were brilliant, like magic, but Madame Halder saw many more things. From the configuration system that Luonan strongly promoted, she could see that this was a complex and vivid set of modules. It was constructed from different modules such as shaping, conducting heat, and so on. And under Luonan's will, fine adjustments could be made at any time. External resources and internal logic blended into one, forming a true and visible power. This was true control power. It was a high-end, highly efficient, and highly difficult method. Luonan could sense it from her body. Madame Halder closed her eyes. It really did feel like someone was touching the nape of her neck with a slightly cold finger. The two bodies made contact, bringing forth a numbing itch, a slight pain, and other complex and subtle sensations. She didn't mind this, just like how she didn't mind exposing her body in front of the opposite sex. But she wouldn't act as if she didn't care. She just maintained her natural posture under Luonan's touch, and she pondered the most crucial question. Several seconds later she asked once more, "Is there something wrong?" Luonan finally spoke through telepathy. "The progress of strengthening the spinal nerves is much faster than expected. It's much stronger than I was back in the day. This is all thanks to the key to the container of formatting theory provided by Mr. Luo. It's not that bad. The Blood Flame Order's body refinement technique is quite exquisite. Only by combining the two can there be this sort of effect. But even so, the strength of your fleshly body is still disproportionate when compared to a sharp blade that has been tempered 100 times. It's useless to have the dragon-slaughtering blade slash yourself first when you draw it. There's no need for a direct attack. Just the residual energy that overflows and circulates is already extremely effective with a bit of control." Control? Is that the goal you're pursuing? Madame Halder's eyes remained closed. She felt the pain of her muscles twisting and tearing in every part of her body. She smiled without saying a word. Luonan's temporarily condensed fingers streaked across her back. The permeating water vapor became a medium for his mental senses. allowing him to probe deeper into the details of her body. But at the same time, most of his energy was placed on the lava lake in the stone forest of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss district. This was because that was the essence of Madame Halder's goal. Ever since the early hours of the morning of New Year's Day, Luo Nan had already confirmed that Mrs. Halder was the first ablatum of the Blood Flame Order. She was the central axis that operated the entire Blood Soul Temple system. However, what this woman pursued was never control over the system. The Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss district was nothing more than a tool to her. More accurately speaking, it was nothing more than a furnace. The extreme emotions poured in by her believers were the fuel for the furnace's flames. She continued to burn and grind, tempering it into a bright light. It did not belong to any system. It was a unique creation that belonged only to her. Because of this, she remained indifferent when Luo Nan continued to throw pressure and negative emotions at her. Even when the sun wheel behind the Wraith sign passed through the polar domain and Luo Nan to smash a terrifying extreme power into the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss district, turning it into a forbidden zone of death. In essence, Madame Halder was deprived of control over the system of the Blood Soul Temple. She remained calm and composed. All of this, from Madame Halder's perspective, was a furnace fire. They were all accelerants. Only she herself was a valuable material. This woman was very crazy, and she was even more interesting. There was just one thing that Luo Nan didn't understand. The grinded blade is a level higher than the user. This kind of technique. You're saying that this originated from the heart-searing blade issued by Her Majesty Empress Wu? It doesn't look like it no matter how I look at it. I'm afraid there aren't many people in this world who are equally proficient in the dripping sword, Mr. Luo. That's true. Luo Nan openly admitted. In any case, this core is quite high level. I'll study it a bit more later. Luo Nan withdrew his hand. Today's homework was more or less over. Madame Halder sat up with her arms propped up. She focused on regulating her energy, and only now did Lu have the chance to speak. Aside from serving Madame Halder, she had another mission. Mr. Luo, we've already discovered the information you provided. We've locked onto the most likely areas. Please take a look. The work area displayed a satellite image of another major maritime metropolis in the East Asian region, Banyan City. 3 special areas had already been marked out. Right now, all of them appeared dark red, completely different from the other areas. Although the Order's influence in Banyan City isn't that great, Snake Tongue has always been independent. She doesn't have many old friends. It will be very difficult for her to transfer her soul to a second body. As long as we lock onto the location, we will be halfway to success. Today, I will rush to Banyan City to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Oh, that's fine. Madame Halder opened her eyes at this time. Snake Tongue is an experienced architect of the mental side. She is also world famous for her curse techniques. All sorts of traps and ambushes can't be underestimated. We need to be prepared to lose personnel. The transfer plan after we succeed needs to be even more secure. After all, we aren't the only ones searching right now. Yes. Luo Nan didn't mind too much. He wanted the Blood Flame Order to act. He just thought of it as looking for a logistics company. I'll be watching when the time comes. Madame Halder's energy had recovered a bit. She was already able to make small talk. Mr. Luo's ability to mentally travel 10,000 miles is truly enviable. She gave her hand to Lu as she spoke. Lu slowly stood up with Li's help. At the same time, she adjusted the position of the fireproof towel, allowing the exposed skin to rotate. There's only one international flight from T-City to Banyan City. It leaves this morning. You can move at night or early tomorrow morning. Chapter 695. To be precise, the so-called new plane was the deep blue world located at the center of the Pacific Ocean. It was joined by T-City and Chan City, the 2 cities that formed a long and narrow search triangle. After all, where was the new plane? Was it really a subsidiary plane of the deep blue world as the rumor said? Were there really extraordinaries who had already entered and explored it? There was no proof at all. Even so, it was impossible to dispel the thoughts of the various powers and powerful individuals who were determined to win. There are many people, but their minds are all on the ocean. This side is fine. Lady Halder was a bit reserved in her words. Perhaps there was even a bit of ridicule. Lu answered for the specific data. According to the information we obtained, There are at least 20 extraordinaries participating in the 3,000-kilometer journey from T-City to the entrance to the deep blue world. There are nearly 8 million square kilometers of sea. The Star Alliance Committee has dispatched 60 naval ships and 20 airships of the Air and Space Army to act as the search force. There are over 20,000 people participating and they are sparing no expense. The number of bounties and enlistments of social personnel will not be less than this number. In fact, this number has dropped from the peak of last month. Oh, the restless period has passed. Lady Halder smiled. After all, the so-called traces of Gongqi were just a glimpse. Actually, just a plausible clue was able to shift the focus of the search from the western Pacific Ocean to the southern Pacific Ocean, spanning 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers. It is quite astonishing. It is a new plane after all. Yes. Boundless wealth and power. Luo Nan didn't continue on this topic. Instead he said goodbye. I still have classes in Xia City. I'll be heading back first. If there are any problems, contact me at any time. Mr. Luo, what about tomorrow's practice? I will notify you along with the operation in Ban City. Luo Nan's condensed water man leaped into the air with these words. The light of the water diffused into mist, and he disappeared without a trace. Luo Nan said that he was returning to Xia City, but there were still some untruths. He didn't immediately turn around. Instead his mind moved forward. He borrowed the evaporating water vapor on the surface of the sea and the rich environment of water molecules to lightly shake his soul cloak. He suddenly crossed a distance of 2,000 kilometers and arrived at the South Pacific Ocean northwest of T-City. Here Luo Nan wouldn't gather watermen like he did in front of Lady Halder. This was because there were at least 10 extraordinaries in this area. Their solidified configurations in the Abyss region were each guiding the storm turbulence in the Abyss region, interfering with the material plane in different ways, spreading across the sky and the sea in search of clues. Even though the ocean was vast and had a range of millions of square kilometers, 100 warships would not even amount to a sesame seed. However, it was convenient for soul power to travel, and they could sense each other from afar, so the phenomenon of meeting each other still existed. The soul forces of the dozen or so extraordinaries would occasionally cross paths, but they were still considered courteous. Sometimes they would even communicate with each other, maintaining a relatively balanced and peaceful state. At the same time they formed a net of varying density. Looked like the gap wasn't small, but it was tight on the inside and loose on the outside. If anything were to happen, it would definitely be tightened in an instant, attracting the attention of all parties. The Blood Flame Order's intelligence wasn't wrong, but Luo Nan knew more than they did. Over the past 3 to 4 months, his consciousness had traveled across the Pacific Ocean with the support of the Soul Cloak. Chan City, D City, and the entrance to the Deep Blue World were all places he frequented. In the beginning, Luo Nan still came and went from the polar domain for the sake of caution. He used pure observation to understand the situation. But as time passed, Luo Nan gradually developed a new method due to the demands of reality. The water man condensed in D City had long since collapsed into beads of water, and the water vapor merged into the ocean. However, the rules and laws that formed the water man did not disperse because of the disintegration of its external form. On the contrary, without a relatively fixed and constrained structure, its series of changes and extensions became more effective. There was clearly an incorporeal frame within the void. It had practically completely abandoned the constraints of form. It was just a kind of structural concept. It was precisely with the insertion of this core of concept that the water vapor above and below the surface of the ocean possessed a special structural meaning on a higher level, even though it still maintained its natural form. From Luo Nan's perspective, a condensed water man and the several thousand square kilometers of ocean surface were both carriers of the core of concept. There was no essential difference between them. The same stream of water could be a probe for gathering information, or it could be a wire for transmitting information. It just depended on where it was located within the overall framework and what role it suited under the specific environmental conditions. As long as the core of concept didn't change, the overall framework could change according to the situation. The specific structural parts could be a probe one second and a wire the next. In short, because of the injection of Luo Nan's core of concept, the area of the ocean he was paying attention to came to life. It became a special structural creation. Even though it was affected by the basic structure of water molecules, the gravity of the earth, the winds and currents of the sea, the schools of water birds and fishes, and other quantitative and variable influences, with the limitations of form and the limitlessness of variables, this area of the ocean still possessed inconceivable characteristics under the control of Luo Nan's core of concept. It was an extension of Luo Nan's senses, and it could also become an enormous processing plant. All sorts of parts could be forged at any time and different instruments could be pieced together. From multiple angles and levels, it could carry out reconnaissance, detection, guidance, and misdirection toward targets within its range. All of Luo Nan's actions were hidden under the great background of the natural activities of the ocean. It possessed a high degree of concealment. At the very least, the powerful people from the Star Alliance Committee, the Society Quantum Corporation, the Secret Order, and other different powers did not realize that there was a youth observing, probing, and even examining them right next to them on the ebb and flow of the ocean's surface. Who would have thought that the splashing waves, the sudden torrential rain, and the blowing winds could all be sensitive sensors? They could transmit all sorts of sensitive information to a distance of over 10,000 kilometers at all times. Luo Nan benefited greatly from the dozens of days of observation. However, the most direct harvest was the core of concept that grew increasingly refined and nimble during this process. Luo Nan called it the core. This was the origin of the dynamo core and the psychic core of the virtual brain system. It was the system's fundamental method of using simplicity to control complexity, using less to control more. Luo Nan was able to gain this comprehension thanks to Mrs. Halder. It was this woman's extreme tempering that allowed Luo Nan to realize that the core consciousness of humans could be tempered to such a degree. Luo Nan was not as extreme as Mrs. Halder, but he possessed a pure concept that was constructed from the formatting principles. With this as a foundation, Luo Nan tempered and forged it through countless configurations. Then he applied it in the dense sea region of extraordinaries, gradually forming a unique Luo core that belonged solely to Luo Nan. Luo Nan could be considered to have truly crossed the threshold of the virtual brain system in terms of configuration thinking. Yes, this should be the true face of Luo Nanqi. The image of Luo Nan projected in the hearts of others needed to be stirred by the Luo Nanqi and installed with the corresponding chip. Only then could it become material that Luo Nan could control. Only then would it truly have meaning for Luo Nan. Of course, the current Luo Zhixin and Luo Nanqi were still far from their final forms. They had only absorbed the side of laws and rules. Emotions and desires were practically uncontaminated. They could only be used purely on the material plane. It would have been fine in the past, but Luo Nan could see the results of Mrs. Halder's hard work and the large fireball that was wantonly scattering light and heat in the polar domain. It was impossible for Luo Nan to ignore it. But he still didn't have a clue as to how to add this kind of power to it. Right now, Luo Nan's work was not the focus of Luo Nan's work. Gong Qi, who was becoming more and more of an influential figure, was the focus. Speaking of which, Gong Qi was trapped in the cloud world. Wasn't it all thanks to Luo Nan that he was able to stir up a storm? Only after confirming that everything in the relevant sea region was normal did Luo Nan's consciousness truly return. He went through a great shuttle, breaking through the barrier of space and time, and entered the cloud world. The torrential sea of clouds surged with waves. Blood-red rays of light penetrated through the gaps in the clouds. It was impossible to see the edge of the light, and it even blurred everything up and down. Luo Nan didn't care about the direction. He borrowed the soul cloak to quickly lock onto his key target. It was that old man Gong Qi who had been very active recently. If converted to Chan City's time, it was April 21st right now. It was a weekend off. Gong Qi had been exploring with Snake Tongue for 2 consecutive days, searching for the ultimate mysteries of the cloud world. Both of them were in a soul-body state. It was just that after half a year of grinding and dissipating, the difference between them was extremely obvious. Gong Qi's body burned with spiritual light. It was bright and resplendent, making him seem like a god. Snake Tongue, on the other hand, was shrouded in a thin layer of mist. Her radiance was not obvious and she was nearly transparent. She was mixed in with the surrounding clouds and could be drowned out at any time. In fact, Snake Tongue's soul body had already shrunk by more than 2 sizes. She followed behind Gong Qi, looking more like a legendary back spirit. She cast a gaze filled with resentment ahead, not concealing it at all. It was as if Gong Qi didn't feel anything. In fact, he didn't care at all. Half a year was enough to obliterate all promises, to shatter all hopes. Snake Tongue still remembered the day she was thrown into this strange world. It was October 25, 2096. At this moment 180 days were about to be gathered. She went from the panic of being trapped here alone to the pleasant surprise and vigilance of Gong Qi crossing through space. Then came the days and nights of exploration and attrition. Her mood was synchronized with the state of her soul body. It continued to weaken almost irreversibly. Her fleshly body, which was stored in Ban City, was about to reach the limit of the advanced life support system. According to the established procedures, a freezing operation would be carried out next to preserve her last shred of hope. However, with the degree of weakness of her soul body, what hope would there be even if she returned? What was the value of her existence now? Chapter 696. Gong Qi raised his head and looked at the ceaselessly flowing clouds. What he let out was an incongruous sigh. The light is getting stronger and stronger. Perhaps after a period of time, that light will be able to illuminate the entire vast thousand worlds. If one doesn't come here, they most likely won't be able to see such a resplendent scene of the polar domain. Snake Tongue didn't say a word. She faced him with indifference. In any case, she could only listen to Gong Qi's description. She couldn't sense what was happening in the polar domain at all. However, Luo Nan was using his soul cloak to sense the situation over here. His mood was inevitably affected. He knew what Gong Qi meant by light. Yes, that was the light of the polar domain. It was the light and heat emitted by the source of the terrifying power that Luo Nan had traced back to the Wraith sign. More than 4 months ago, it had briefly ascended into the sky in the polar domain to demonstrate its strength, but it had been blocked by a mysterious and unfathomable curtain. According to Luo Nan's knowledge, this was the case in the local spacetime and the deep blue world. The only exception was here. For some reason, the curtain did not extend its magical effect to the cloud world. The light and heat emitted by that terrifying source continued to spread throughout the cloud world through the polar domain. And as time passed, it seemed to be getting closer and closer to the physical plane. Every time Luo Nan arrived at this place, he seemed to be able to hear the humming and trembling of the cloud world. This was the prelude to the friction and collision of space and time. Luo Nan didn't know the reason or the nature of all this, but he knew that the cloud world was facing a huge change. On the other hand, it was very likely that Gong Qi, who he'd always been targeting, had suddenly grasped a good opportunity to break out of this predicament. Gong Qi was a transcendent who had lived for more than 90 years. His cultivation and experience were top-notch. He would not let go of this opportunity. From the moment the rays of light had lit up the polar domain, this old fellow had invested a large amount of energy into research. More than 4 months, nearly 150 days of time, was enough for him to produce a certain amount of results. At the very least, there was some movement. While conversing with Snake Tongue, Gong Qi pierced his soul force into the abyssal region and probed the polar domain. At the same time, he made slight adjustments to his own solidified configuration in order to adapt to the long-term illumination of the polar domain light. The abyssal region's constantly changing environment was also trying to figure out the corresponding rules and utilize them. Luo Nan quietly observed from the depths of the torrential turbulence of the abyssal region. Watching how Gong Qi adjusted the solidified configuration step by step, pondering over the structure and basic principles, grasping the habits of the structure, and referring it to his own thinking of the configuration. At the same time, he could also verify the special zones in the abyss region and polar domain under the condition of crossing the space-time barrier, and what kind of changes would occur. In short, Luo Nan tried to speculate what stage Gong Qi's judgment of the situation had reached and how far he was from breaking out of the situation. Staring blankly was absolutely not an option. The development of the situation pushed Luo Nan to speed up his progress. In fact, Luo Nan himself was already impatient. What he needed to do now was to finish strengthening himself as soon as possible and prepare as many bargaining chips as possible, no matter what level or direction he was in. Snake Tongue, who was like a spirit behind his back, was one of them. The surgery he was paying close attention to today and tomorrow was the other. Oh, visitation time is almost up. As a student, he had to apply for leave if he wanted to visit the patient in time, but he couldn't make it to the weekend. But if he couldn't, or if it was inconvenient, he could only skip class. Luo Nan imagined the scene of him taking a leave of absence. "Teacher, I want to apply for leave." "Reason for the leave?" "To visit the surgery patient." "What does it have to do with the patient?" "We've never met." "Which hospital?" "Mercy Heart Hospital. It's 2,000 kilometers away in Spring City." How long do you need to apply for? That depends on whether things go smoothly or not. Forget it. Luo Nan could lie, but unless he really fabricated a melodramatic reason like a serious illness of his immediate family, the school would never grant him a leave of absence, no matter what, given his credit record of the past few months. What's more, Luo Nan had left Xia City as early as 9 o'clock in the evening of the 21st of April in order to eliminate the error of teleportation. He had been transported through the cloud world to the southwest wilderness area of Spring City. He was currently resting and reorganizing at the forward operating base, preparing to receive a mid-range cross-country trip of over 500 kilometers, as well as an even more exciting ambush operation in the city. Oh no. He was visiting the patient. Luo Nan's consciousness rolled back, arriving at the edge of the volcanic area where the physical Blood Soul Temple was placed. Many instruments were unable to operate due to the environment of the volcanic area's core region being too vile. It wasn't easy to arrange supplies, so Luo Nan kept this forward operating base on the periphery. He had been replenishing supplies for the past few months. He had even installed a second-hand thermostatic system, causing the cave on the periphery of the volcanic area to become livable. There was no doubt that Luo Nan had done this out of consideration for himself. He had used this forward operating base as a transfer station over the past 100 days, but he had gone to quite a few places. Of course, practically no one knew about this, except for the little girl who was currently in the forward operating base, silently protecting his safety. Hey Ruiwen. Good morning. Good morning. Actually, the outside was still a pitch-black expanse due to the limitations of the time zone. Luo Nan practically didn't sleep for the entire night. He traveled between space and time, his telepathic thoughts rushing tens of thousands of kilometers. Right now his mind was trembling with energy and he wasn't the least bit sleepy. Especially when he thought about the upcoming crossing of the wilderness and the follow-up operation in Spring City, he became all the more excited. After greeting Ruiwen, he once again inspected the assembly modules of the off-road vehicle he had prepared last night. He even did a manual loading and unloading. After all, if the vehicle broke down on the road, there was no AI in the forward operating base to help fix it. Everything was going smoothly. Over the past few months he had been learning about mechanical design from Worker Zhai. He had also borrowed Worker Zhai's platform to frequently repair machines. With the addition of his mental side and configurational thinking, he could be said to be a veteran hobbyist. At the very least he was half a professional. The small off-road motorcycle was disassembled and assembled within 5 minutes, and the system passed the test in one go. Next was the testing of the electromagnetic Vanguard Z. Luo Nan confirmed that he was going to bring the exoskeleton equipment with him to act as a safeguard for the operation. He was already familiar with this exoskeleton equipment. The debugging time was even shorter and everything was ready in no time. Ruiwen just watched silently from the side during this time like a doll. Luo Nan didn't forget about her. He wiped his hands after all the debugging was completed, then he rubbed Ruiwen's head. Okay, everything is ready. I'm getting ready to go. You need to go to class as well. I'll go with you. I'm skipping class today. We'll skip together. Cough Ruiwen, you need to help me cover up. Aunt is already numb to me skipping class by myself, but if I bring you away, do you believe that she won't chase me all the way to Spring City? Ruiwen expressed very seriously, I don't believe it. You have to believe it even if you don't believe it. Luo Nan began to put on the face of an older brother. The operation will start in the afternoon, and the operation will be delayed. You'll be wasting over 10 hours here. What about your homework? Ruiwen's pitch-black eyes didn't move. Okay, I have no way to directly send it to Spring City, so I went around in a circle. You and I are different. You come as you please. How about this? If there's any danger along the way, I'll call for backup at the first instance. I'll also invite you over at the first instance after we reach Spring City. Let us brother and sister pair join forces and rob him. Forget about the last sentence. No matter what was said and done, the dignity of her older brother prevailed. Ruiwen finally yielded and returned to Xia City under Luo Nan's urging. She should be able to make it in time for breakfast. Today was more or less settled. Luo Nan let out a long breath. He didn't stop and began to move things outside. He had filled in the cracks in the rock flow near the forward operating base a long time ago. The caterpillar robot could also help with the transportation. Everything was ready in a short 15 minutes. He finished assembling the equipment in a certain flat area outside the cave and put on the light exoskeleton armor. Then he started up the off-road motorcycle. The motor hummed as it operated, just like his restless heart. April 22nd. The weather was clear with a force 2 to 3 easterly winds. There were no high-threat mutants along the planned route. The journey was estimated to take 6 hours and arrive before 1 in the afternoon. Luo Nan took a deep breath and adjusted his posture on the off-road motorcycle. He was just about to start up when he suddenly recalled something. "All right, take a picture as a souvenir." He released a miniature probing flying bug and gave a thumbs up to the camera, leaving behind a conclusive image. Luo Nan laughed with a ha sound. He raised his legs and the motor of the motorcycle sped up. He charged forward with a roar, charging straight toward the boundary of Spring City that was 500 kilometers away. The rapidly unfolding and changing wilderness was before his eyes. He had no companions, no bodyguards, no omnipresent psychic wave network, and no mission channel that constantly updated and alerted him. Luo Nan just drove the motorcycle and sped across the desolate wilderness. The howls of wild beasts and vicious birds rang in his ears. Occasionally he would see the dust and smoke of groups of beasts galloping into the distance. At the same time, the mutant multi-headed vulture high in the sky cast its vicious and greedy gaze over. The high-level hunters in the wilderness pricked up their ears one after another from the rhythmic vibrations of the ground. This was the wilderness. This was the main appearance that the Earth Monarch had spent decades dressing up. This was a place where countless people struggled to escape. At the same time, there were also countless people who forcefully ventured to explore this place. Luo Nan's grandfather, mother, and father had all left the most beautiful moments of their lives here. No matter where they went, there would always be some special and valuable things here. Luo Nan still didn't have a clear direction in regards to the wilderness. But Luo Nan was wantonly smearing traces that belonged to him within this enormous painting. Whether it was success or destruction, there was no need to pay attention to any of it. In this spacious and dangerous world, he naturally abandoned the city and all the rules and laws of his habitual living environment. He also abandoned the imminent pressure and danger. At least for this moment he could enjoy the taste of unfettered freedom to his heart's content. Chapter 697. Spring City was located in the southwestern highlands. It was surrounded by many mountains and transportation was inconvenient. During the 100 years of peace before the Third World War, a series of road infrastructure had finally been built. However, after the war, the mutants had wreaked havoc and large areas had become uninhabited. At present, most of the roads had been destroyed. One could only vaguely see some traces among the weeds, rocks, and collapsed mountain ruins. In such a place, the maglev flying vehicles in the city were not practical. Aerial vehicles like flying shuttles also had to face the attacks of flying mutants, and there was the possibility of crashing into mountains at any moment. Therefore, most people who made a living here chose traditional, sturdy SUVs. Coupled with some auxiliary modules like maglev, they could deal with most situations. At this moment, on a gentle slope of a mountain, a small convoy of 3 SUVs and about 10 people were carefully setting up equipment to monitor the surrounding environment. The leader was tall and burly with a crew cut. He wore sunglasses, a leather jacket, and a pair of coarse trousers. He looked rather valiant. However, at the same time he was also an expert in controlling equipment. He calmly commanded the crowd and asked his companions to install equipment in various positions. Every order was clear and the scene was busy but not chaotic. Someone was willing to play the role of a lackey and praised, as expected of a field team. "With you, Brother Bao, we have a clear target." "Pup, what's that sound?" "Ah." Brother Bao frowned and listened attentively. A few seconds later, his expression became even uglier. "Which idiot is this? Didn't you see the rolling earth dragon sign? I used maglev to move it bit by bit." At this moment, many people present could already hear the vibration of the motor engine. Of course, the most ear-piercing sound was the friction between the car and the bad road surface. "It's southwest. It's not coming from the city." The person in charge of remote monitoring raised his hand to inform them. Brother Bao moved over. Through the monitoring equipment he saw a rolling earth dragon returning from the southwest wilderness. It was the dry season around Spring City for many years. Dust and grass were flying everywhere and it was hard to see clearly. He could only tell that it did not look like a large vehicle. "It doesn't look like a long-distance traveler." Maybe someone from one of the teams returned to the city temporarily. While they were talking, the surveillance equipment finally captured some details. It was a small off-road motorcycle and it was all alone. Brother Bao cursed softly. Send him a signal. If he wants to live, he has to take a detour. Even if he can survive, he has to compensate us for our losses. The lackey did not miss the opportunity to praise again. Brother Bao is very particular. If you wanted me, I would have asked him to add another dish to the rolling earth dragon. Cut the crap, hurry up and send the signal. Oh my god. Brother Bao cried out involuntarily. Before that, in the surveillance screen in front of the rolling earth dragon, the hard ground suddenly exploded, and a huge pit with a diameter of more than 3 meters appeared. Soil and rocks flew everywhere. What was even more terrifying was that in the depths of the huge pit, there seemed to be a demonic giant flower blooming. It was formed by dozens of hundreds of slender tentacles, and light blue mist sprayed out from the center. In the blink of an eye, it swallowed the off-road motorcycle at the front of the earth dragon. Bullshit, rolling earth dragon, this is a chrysanthemum demon bug. Brother Bao's face turned green. He pulled out the topographic map and took another look. Then he slapped himself. I'm so king stupid. There was clearly an underground river. Wasn't this the favorite place of the chrysanthemum demon bug? This is a trap. Retreat. He suddenly raised his voice. Old 5, report to the branch and inform the city defense forces. Everyone retreat immediately. The chrysanthemum demon bug was one of the most famous B-grade mutants in the area around Spring City. Its threat level was B. It lived underground all year round and had extremely high intelligence. It could simulate the sounds and secretions of low-level mutants such as the rolling earth dragon to lure other predators, including human ability users, to take the bait and then kill and devour them wantonly. If this kind of mutant was too close to the city, it could pass through the sewage pipes and break through the city's defenses, causing great chaos. Therefore, in the city defense system, this fellow was always at the top of the list of targets to kill. It was definitely too late to think about this now. Brother Bao could not care less about being particular. Looking at the location where the chrysanthemum demon bug had appeared, their hunting team had basically taken a trip to the gates of hell. If the motorcyclist had not been the bait, their small team would have been wrapped up and swallowed a few minutes later. You all collect your corpse later, and bury it. Brother Bao is benevolent and righteous. Brother Bao slapped the lackey's head and roared for his men to retreat. Retreat, retreat, retreat. Throw away all the equipment. The chrysanthemum demon bug's hunting zone has a radius of 50 kilometers. If you're too slow, you'll be waiting to be digested. More than 10 members of the hunting team squeezed into 3 SUVs. At this time, it was impossible to use the slow maglev plug-in. Instead, they drove at full power and sped down the rugged mountain road. Brother Bao's car felt like it was about to overturn several times. He relied on his years of driving skills and the smart system to forcibly correct it. Across the mountain, there was a muffled explosion and a sharp sizzling sound. That scalp-numbing sizzling sound was undoubtedly the sound of the chrysanthemum demon bug. As for the explosion, the motorcycle probably exploded. Brother Bao turned his head and looked back. There seemed to be a flash of light on the other side of the mountain, very much like the afterglow of a thermal weapon. Tragic, really tragic. Every year there were about 1,000 people in Spring City who died in the wilderness. There was no lack of ability users among them. Now there was another one. Brother Bao thought of something again. Pay attention to the bottom of the car. Refer to the topographic map and avoid the underground river. The chrysanthemum demon bug passes through the water. Its speed is not slower than a car. Can also spray poisonous fog. Just as he was shouting, the lackey beside him screamed, "Bug, it's coming up." Brother Bao turned around in shock and saw dozens of slender tentacles flying above the mountain. Occasionally they crossed the mountain barrier and rose and fell. This was not a normal method, but it was even more terrifying. Brother Bao cursed, but he had no other choice. He could only shout, "Speed up, speed up." The driver of the jeep he was in was an experienced veteran. Just by looking he could infer the approximate speed of the pursuers behind him. He immediately howled in despair. They're going at least 200 kilometers per hour. There's no justice in this world. Bullsh**. Brother Bao roared back. If the chrysanthemum demon bug could run at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour on the ground, its threat level would definitely not be B-. Even if the branch in the city defense army were to go all out, they would have to kill these perverted mutants. Messy thoughts that were of no help to the current situation flashed through Brother Bao's mind. However, when he turned his head to look at the flying tentacles, his mind was already blank. At this moment, there was a loud bang in front of him. The SUV at the front finally could not withstand the test of speeding on the rugged mountain road and flipped over. If not for the fact that the expensive SUV was relatively sturdy, the people in the car were agile, and the smart posture correction would have been just enough. This was a tragedy of falling straight down a cliff. The car was destroyed and people died. However, in this way the car in front was blocked by the car behind on the narrow mountain road. Retreat became a joke. At the same time, an even greater tragedy had clearly caught up. Brother Bao's mind exploded. He forcefully suppressed the stupid words of charging over. Instead, a certain thought rushed out. I can't embarrass Captain Chiu. In the next second he shouted, save him. The two SUVs behind him braked urgently. Brother Bao did not wait for the car to stop before jumping down. He pulled a few of his companions who had just gotten up from the ground and used brute force to straighten the overturned SUV. He then let the injured people with inconvenient legs sit in the other cars. The car behind quickly pass. Hurry up and start the engine. The driver in front was a little dazed from the fall and did not know to check the car's condition immediately. Brother Bao's scalp went numb when he saw that. He rushed over, pushed him away and forcefully started the engine. Thank the heavens and thank the ancestors. There was no problem with the high-power modified motor of the off-road vehicle, and there was no problem with the intelligent system's instantaneous self-detection. At that moment, the two cars that passed quickly had already run a few hundred meters away. When Brother Bao turned around, the flying tentacles of the chrysanthemum demon bug had completely crossed the peak and were rolling over. Quick, quick, quick. Brother Bao snatched the driver's seat and called everyone to get into the car. Without waiting for them to sit down, he stepped on the accelerator. The car roared forward. However, it had only traveled about 10 meters when the wind howled above its head. The swaying tentacles rode the wind and even whipped the broken windshield. In the next second, the chrysanthemum demon bug's body, which weighed at least 2 tons, smashed heavily onto the ground 20 meters away. The off-road vehicle braked suddenly, but it could not stop it and crashed heavily. Fortunately, the huge flesh tentacles in front were not hard enough. The off-road vehicle seemed to have hit a sponge, and it did not cause a more serious accident. Reverse, reverse quickly. The original driver sitting in the front passenger seat screamed crazily. Brother Bao had already switched to reverse, but he did not step on the accelerator again. The chrysanthemum demon bug in front of him lay on the ground, its tentacles still twitching. There was still a slight fragrance of meat. The smell molecules penetrated the broken windshield and blew over with the dry mountain wind. Apart from its size, it looked more like a half-roasted sea anemone. Brother Bao stared at the huge piece of meat in front of him in a daze without blinking. At that moment, the roar of an electric motor sounded from behind. It belonged to an off-road motorcycle. A few seconds later, the other party stopped steadily at the side of the off-road vehicle, and a cold metallic luster pierced his eyes. Brother Bao, who had just retired from the army, could naturally tell at a glance that it was an exoskeleton armor. As for the model, why did it look more like a Sergeant X2 humanoid robot? Modified goods? The metal armor covered the other party's face and figure. Brother Bao could not guess the other party's origin at all. He could only follow the simplest logic. Are you a soldier? There was no reaction from the other party. Brother Bao asked foolishly, what's the matter? A buzzing voice finally came from behind the metal mask. Do me a favor. Yes, go ahead. Brother Bao's mind finally came around. He had killed the chrysanthemum demon bug alone. He was definitely a B-rank expert. There were less than 10 such people in Spring City. He definitely had to respect him. Jacket and pants. Huh. Alright, use your sunglasses too. Half a minute later, Brother Bao obediently handed over his equipment. The motorcyclist nodded and pointed at the chrysanthemum demon bug in front of him. I'll leave this to you. As he spoke, he gave Brother Bao a thumbs up, probably to express his gratitude. Amidst the roar, the off-road motorcycle sped on the mountain road. Brother Bao and the people in the car were dumbfounded. A few minutes later, a lackey called. Brother Bao, where did you drive that motorcycle? Chapter 698. The off-road motorcycle retracted its wildness in the wilderness. It traveled at a speed of 70 kilometers per hour amidst the dense flow of traffic. Luo Nan's current appearance was that of Brother Bao's on the mountain road. He wore a leather jacket on his upper body, coarse trousers on his lower body, and a pair of large-toed boots. He also wore large sunglasses on his face, covering half of his overly young face. Luo Nan's physique was quite different from Brother Bao's, but after taking into account the amplification of the exoskeleton armor, it was more suitable. He followed the techniques taught by Red Fox and smeared some camouflage paint on his face, causing his skin to become coarse. He raised his collar and covered his entire body tightly. Aside from his small palms, the current Luo Nan was a burly man with a height of nearly 190 centimeters. He drove the wild off-road motorcycle on the intercity highway of Spring City. The surrounding skyscrapers cast shadows upon them, obliterating the difference between Spring City and Xia City to a large degree. No wonder some people said that the 88 metropolitan areas of the world were basically copied and pasted onto Earth. However, the electromagnetic waves shuttling back and forth in the surrounding void, as well as the signal commands contained within, pointed out the difference between the two. The authority function of the wristband popped up a reminder of temporary registration. The Skynet equipment from the streets and alleys uploaded the image data of the off-road motorcycle and its driver to the SCA's Social Authority database for comparison and search. The exoskeleton armor, which was a modified military item, was mostly unable to escape the monitoring and defense of various scanners. It had a built-in chip that needed to be docked with the relevant system, registered and obtained authorization. It went without saying that if the driver's identity, social authority, and the process of selling, using, and remodeling the relevant equipment did not correspond, forming a complete chain of information, then the police department's drones, the SCA's operations team, and even the city defense army would be dispatched according to the level of danger. They would carry out coercive measures against the outsiders. 1,000 days at home is good, but a day outside is hard. In the current information age of the IoT, a normal person who wanted to be a bit rebellious and go on an exciting trip would probably face such a situation. However, the key point was that Luo Nan was not a normal person. He had trained with Red Fox, who was proficient in urban stealth and assassination, for 2 months. He already had a rough understanding of how to hide from the government's authority system. More importantly, he had the external neuron. He could use interference waves to easily penetrate deeper into the system and use a more willful method to alter the key data. Luo Nan wasn't a professional. He might not be able to pull off a flawless disguise, but it was enough as long as he could hide for a dozen or so hours. The off-road motorcycle passed through the peripheral satellite cities and entered the city. It was around 2 in the afternoon, an hour later than expected. This was because of the mountain roads around Spring City and the relatively dense number of mutants, which more or less caused some hindrance. Luckily, Luo Nan left quite a bit of room for maneuver. He activated the off-road motorcycle's autopilot mode and let it follow the predetermined route to the predetermined location. At this moment, his soul energy was interacting with the external neuron, causing the interference waves to cover a radius of several dozen kilometers. It was like another form of map navigation, guiding the car to its destination. More importantly, the interference wave had found its intended target, which was the gynecology ward of Mercy Heart Hospital, which was 20 kilometers away, and re-established the connection. On the virtual brain system interface, a window related to the night-level basic biochemical reactor furnace appeared. A series of system information was refreshed. There were many glaring warning messages among them. They were all related to biochemical pollution and the self-destruct program. From Luo Nan's perspective, this was already a common topic. He skimmed over the messages until he discovered a status update. The furnace has entered offline hibernation mode. It is currently in a transplantable state. At the same time, the third-level interface of the Wraith Sign system, the Jintong's spiritual light seed, also began the preloading process. The two interfaces synchronized and connected, ceaselessly updating information. They echoed with each other in preparation for the upcoming operation. This was the key reason why Luo Nan needed to personally come. After all, it would be like what he did a few months ago at Aurora Cloud City. The long-range radiation of interference waves would create far too large of a commotion, and there would be a slight delay. It was very likely that it would lead to unpredictable consequences. Yes, it was like this. Luo Nan gripped the handlebars of the motorcycle back and forth. He breathed in a few mouthfuls of the warm air of Spring City, releasing the nervousness and excitement of his first solo operation. Half an hour later, before 3 in the afternoon, Luo Nan arrived at Mercy Heart Hospital of Spring City. This hospital was located in the lower region of a 140-story skyscraper. It was a public hospital of a certain administrative district of Spring City. Luo Nan didn't directly enter. Instead, he used the external maglev light rail track of the high-rise building to spiral upwards. He arrived at the parking lot closest to the top floor of the building. He casually tossed the off-road motorcycle into a corner and entered the building. The top floor of this building was a medical device research and development center. There were relatively few people coming and going. Luo Nan's current attire would be quite eye-catching if he were to appear in front of people. But he had the external neuron by his side, and the range of his mental senses was beyond imagination. The routes he chose were all in the blind spots of the surveillance inside and outside of the building. They were also places where the footprints of people were rare. Even if there were some monitored areas that he was unable to bypass, he could rely on interference waves to forcefully disturb them. And so Luo Nan strolled a circle around the high-rise area. He followed the building's regular green track and went all the way up. He arrived at the rooftop sky garden, which was also the employee activity area. It was currently working hours, so there weren't many people here. But there was something rather eye-catching. It was the pure black flying shuttle on the parking apron that was 1 floor higher than the employee activity area. Through his mental senses, Luo Nan knew that although the shuttle's cabin door was closed and it hadn't been activated, there were still 4 passengers inside. They were on standby at all times. Luo Nan only stopped for a moment in the employee activity area. He looked at the flying shuttle from afar, then turned around and left. He took the elevator down, walking and stopping along the way. A few minutes later, he arrived at the floor of Mercy Hospital. At this time, the interference waves formed by the combination of his soul strength and the external neuron were already being used in the hospital management system. They had gathered key information. This information was the scheduled time for today's surgery at Mercy Hospital. There was one message among them: Rin Chi, Gynecology Department. Open hysteromyomectomy. Operation Room 4, Intelligent. Scheduled time: 1600 hours. The medical personnel who had been continuously working at the Mutant Research Center for over 4 months was finally unable to ignore the rapidly growing hysteromyomas. They decided to carry out the surgery. Luo Nan confirmed the time. It was a bit past 3 in the afternoon. It was just right. The real-time structural diagram of Mercy Hospital was imprinted before his eyes under the effects of the mental sensing network. Luo Nan walked unhurriedly and familiarly to the surgical area. But he didn't get too close. This was because he sensed the existence of 2 energy targets that were clearly different from ordinary people within the mental sensing network. One of them was like a raging flame. Powerful psychic waves radiated from his body at all times. He should be a powerful fleshly body, and he was an external type. Generally speaking, the impact of such a character was astonishing. The other person was clearly much more low-key. His energy was obscure and unclear, but he was extremely sensitive. He constantly maintained the intersection of the mental and material planes, floating up and down. Luo Nan was quite familiar with this type of ability user. Cat Eyes was this type. But when it came to the level of soul strength, there was still a considerable gap between them. Therefore, this person should be a very powerful scouting type ability user. If Luo Nan used Cat Eyes as a benchmark to judge, he was most likely an architect-level expert. Oh right, the fleshly body in front was the same. 2B rank experts overseeing things showed how important this surgery was to the people behind the scenes. Luo Nan also attached great importance to it. He specifically called over the Wraith sign. He used the Wraith sign's remarkable methods to monitor these 2B rank ability users from the polar domain. He watched how they arranged things and then compared it with his own plan to carry out the final fine adjustments. Time passed by the minute and second. Luo Nan strolled around the periphery of the operating area, precisely avoiding the sensing range of the psychic ability user that resembled Cat Eyes. By the time he made his 5th turn, the AI machinery in Operating Room 4 had begun its operation. Simple surgeries such as the hysteromyomectomy had already been realized in the medical world to be 100% automated. The AI surgical robot could perform the surgery to near perfection. All the doctors needed to do was to perform routine management in front of the monitoring screen. However, there was now an outsider in the monitoring room of the AI surgical platform. It was the psychic ability user that resembled cat eyes. According to the doctors present, he was called Mr. Lon. He used the camera and mental senses to monitor the entire surgery process. Mr. Lan's partner was the fleshly body next to Mr. Lon. Right now Mr. Zhao was not in the monitoring room. Instead he was wearing a large white coat and entering the operating area, which was nominally only accessible to doctors. Of course he was not here to operate on patients. His task was to receive and protect patients. In the monitoring room of the AI surgical platform, Mr. Lon kept an eye on the progress of the surgery in operating room 4. He kept in touch with Mr. Lon at all times. The anesthesia has taken effect. The surgery is about to begin. The laparotomy has been performed. The estimated time is 25 minutes. The hysteromyoma has been removed. The seal is complete. Place it on the conveyor belt. Prepare to receive it. Mr. Lon, who was dressed like a doctor, was already standing at the exit of the conveyor belt outside of operating room 4. This place was usually used to transmit the tissues of the patient that had been surgically removed. It was displayed to the patient's family. If there was a desire to collect it, it could be discussed. Right now, a sealed metal box came out of the conveyor belt. The box itself looked quite high class. It was equipped with a sophisticated combination lock and there was a display screen on top of it. It displayed the conditions of the environment inside the box and emitted a green lustrous light. It displayed the objects placed inside the box. They matched the preset conditions and could be taken away without any worries. Mr. Lon didn't open the box for confirmation. He didn't have the authority to do so. Mr. Lon was the same. Supposedly, this was to avoid contaminating the special tissues inside the box. Only when the box was on the flying shuttle and entered the specially set environment could a second confirmation be done. Chapter 699. Mr. Lon came out of the control room and walked to the entrance of the operating area. At this time Mr. Lon also came out of the operating area. He had long since grown impatient with the white coat on his body. He took it off as soon as he walked out. However, he had already buckled the lockbox on his wrist in advance. He could only curl his lips and directly tear the cuffs of his sleeves. He then threw the damaged white coat into the trash bin at the side. The two of them didn't say much. They walked side by side to the exclusive express elevator. The moment the elevator closed, Mr. Lon tilted his head and glanced outside through the gap. He saw a burly man wearing a leather jacket walking toward the operating area. Mr. Lon signaled with his eyes, "Is something the matter?" Mr. Lon glanced at the lockbox again and shook his head. That fellow's weight seemed somewhat abnormal. He might be a modified person. His aura was a bit stronger than an ordinary person's, but it was limited. Moreover, he was heading in the opposite direction from them. He wasn't a target that needed attention. The express elevator went straight to the highest floor. A minute later, the two of them arrived at the Sky Garden and stepped onto the apron at the highest floor. The personnel left behind in the shuttle had already received the news. They opened the shuttle's cabin door just in time. The two of them entered the cabin. They didn't have the slightest idle talk. They directly walked toward the middle cabin. That was an isolated testing environment specially arranged for the important items to be escorted this time. It was also the last and most important testing segment of the escort mission. According to the designated procedures, the two of them simultaneously entered their fingerprints, irises, passwords, and other information into the lockbox. They smoothly took out the metal box from inside and placed it in the isolated environment. The testing system immediately operated automatically. It controlled the environmental conditions and released complex password information that corresponded with the password on the metal box. Up until now, everything was very normal. According to the procedures, once the target was confirmed to be correct, the isolated testing area would be completely sealed off to give the protected target the best living space. This area was constructed from a mixture of high-strength special glass and metal. Even the powerful B-rank who were known for their brute force and the deep blue walker equipped with highly destructive weapons would find it difficult to break through in a short amount of time. Even if the shuttle itself was hit by a missile, the items in this area would certainly be the last to be destroyed. The strict and somewhat complicated testing process continued to advance. At this time Mr. Lon received a call. He frowned and glanced over. He saw that it was the person in charge of connecting with him from Mercy Hospital. He pondered for a moment and then connected. Without waiting for him to speak, the other side already shouted, "Mr. Lon, someone has broken into the operating area." "Oh." It's a big guy in a leather jacket. He's heading straight for operating room 4. Mr. Lan's heart skipped a beat. Mr. AI, who was beside him, also caught the keywords in the conversation and turned his head abruptly. "Bring it over," Mr. Lon ordered. The receptionist was stunned. "What?" "Bring the surveillance footage over." This operation was relatively simple. It only took about 2 seconds before a stream of information flowed in. Mr. Lon conveniently projected it into the air. The surveillance footage clearly showed a burly man wearing sunglasses and a jacket casually walking to the door of Operating Theater 4. He ignored the no trespassing sign in front of him and the medical staff who chased after him shouting at him to stop him. He pushed open the door and entered. There was an electronic lock on the door of the operating theater, but it was useless. The surveillance camera switched to show the situation in the operating theater. At the moment, the artificial intelligence surgical robot was still performing the suture. It completely ignored the changes outside and maintained a respectable level of concentration. The big guy didn't bother him and walked straight to the window of the conveyor belt. This route made Mr. Lon, who was still in the monitoring room a few minutes ago, feel his heart skip a beat. It was also at this moment that the big guy suddenly turned his face. His dark sunglasses stared directly at the camera. As if he was infected with a fatal infection, the surveillance footage turned pitch black. The receptionist of Mercy Hospital let out a meaningless wail. The surveillance footage has been destroyed. Mr. Lan's eyebrows were already locked tight. His heartbeat had also deviated from the normal range. The series of images transmitted on the surveillance camera were like a horror movie's editing, sending a fatal message to him and his partner. In the next second, the isolation examination area flashed red, and a piercing alarm sounded. It was connected to the movie plot from before. It was like a ferocious ghost suddenly appeared in front of the camera, letting out a strange, penetrating laugh. The hair on Mr. Lan's back stood on end. "Something's wrong." Mr. AI's reaction was even more direct than Mr. Lan's. He pressed hard on the peripheral glass and stared at the system information that flowed like water. He didn't care about anything else except for one word that was the most important. "Does not meet the requirements." Mr. Lon and Mr. AI felt as if their hearts had been stabbed by a sharp knife at the same time. The red light reflected on their faces, but the background was still deathly pale. "That guy!" Mr. AI roared. He turned around and ran out. Someone accidentally blocked in front of him and was also pushed away by his arm. He fell to the ground and almost fainted. Mr. Lan's first reaction was also to rush out. His feet were already moving, but he stopped abruptly. He stared at the shuttle staff. "Contact headquarters requesting remote control." The staff was still in a daze. The receptionist of Mercy Hospital was still shouting on the comms. "Hello? Oh. Mr. Lon, that person came out of the surgery room. The security couldn't do anything to him." Mr. Lon cut off the comms. At this time, the red light of the isolation examination area had already seeped into his eyes. He stared with bloodshot eyes and squeezed out the words from between his teeth. "Headquarters remote control." The staff finally remembered that this was part of the emergency procedure, so he hurriedly obeyed the order. A few seconds later, another wave of detection light cut through. All kinds of information refreshed, but it was faster than the previous process. Another wave of dazzling red light sprayed out from the isolation area. Lan Xiang looked straight at the light, motionless. "Lan Xiang, what are you doing? God, look at what you've done." The request for remote control alarmed the person in charge of the laboratory. The person on the other side instinctively roared and threw the blame, showing that he was completely unprepared in the face of an unexpected situation. Lan Xiang retorted without showing any weakness. "You're the one who made a **TTY safety design. I need to open this damn box right now." The person in charge of the laboratory turned red. "No, you don't have the authority." "I don't either." "Then find someone who has the authority." "Where's Jeff? If he can't do it, then get me Li Wei." "Are you crazy?" Lan Xiang knocked on the hard isolation glass. Look at this notification." I don't want to talk to idiots anymore. The person in charge's nostrils were almost bursting from the breath. The next moment he was pushed away from the screen by a hand. Then a young man with snow-white skin and strange green hair came to the screen. He stared at the isolation area for a second and said, "It's open now." Lan Xiang was also stunned for half a second, mainly because he didn't expect Li Wei to appear the moment he mentioned Li Wei. Fortunately, he quickly came to his senses and turned to look. He saw the metal box's lid pop up, revealing the edge of the snow-white gauze and a dark red sarcoma-like body. At that moment the sarcoma was still pulsating. Lan Xiang was stunned and then his hair stood on end. He couldn't care less about what headquarters thought and immediately contacted his partner. "Come back, it's a trap." Before he finished his sentence, the video communication with headquarters was distorted, and all communications were cut off. The lighting in the central cabin collapsed. As the power system in the isolation area was independently supplied, it lasted for half a second longer. Because of this, Lan Xiang saw a slender, pale hand reach out from the edge of the light. Every inch the hand moved forward, the light dimmed. It was clearly as fast as lightning, but for some reason, it felt like a cruel blunt knife stabbing into his heart, grinding away his thoughts and reason bit by bit. The hand brushed past the metal box and darkness descended completely. The darkness didn't last long, maybe a second, maybe even less. The backup power system was activated and the light came back on. Lan Xiang stood where he was. In the isolation area opposite him, the metal box was still in its original place, but the gauze inside and more importantly the dark red sarcoma on it had disappeared. The isolation area was completely sealed and there were no signs of damage. Of course, there was no normal switch. It was like a ghost passing through the wall, bringing the object they had carefully protected into the unknown netherworld. After a second, Mr. Lan turned around and rushed to the flying shuttle's door. This was an instinctive action and he didn't even know what he wanted to do. But after rushing out of the cabin door, the range of his spiritual senses, which had been extended to the limit, really did appear. Lan Xiang trusted his senses and rushed to the edge of the parking apron. His field of vision suddenly widened, and he could see past the sky garden on the top floor and part of the high-rise open-air parking lot on the side. Then Lan Xiang saw a muscular man wearing a jacket and sunglasses walk out of the parking lot's exclusive elevator at a pace that was neither fast nor slow. He got on an off-road motorcycle and started it. The motorcycle didn't leave immediately but stayed where it was. In the whirring sound of the motor, the muscular man in sunglasses raised his head and slightly turned his face. His dark glasses accurately blocked Lan Xiang's fierce gaze. Under the glasses, the corner of his mouth opened, revealing undisguised malice and pleasure. Lan Xiang's brain exploded, but his characteristic calmness quickly took over. The parking lot was more than 400 meters away from where he was. His senses could reach it, but it was no longer effective. He tried to re-establish communication with his partner. But it was also at this moment that the muscular man in sunglasses in the parking lot raised his arm and raised his thumb. Praise or sarcasm? Lan Xiang quickly knew that he was gravely mistaken. The muscular man in sunglasses was like a child. He raised his thumb and stretched out his index finger, seriously gesturing the shape of a gun. Then there was a bang. The spiritual sense network that Lan Xiang had worked hard to open up instantly had a huge gap. It was as if a spatial storm had suddenly descended, and it was as if a terrifying plasma grenade had exploded in front of his face. 400 meters, spiritual side, abyss area,